training, she will find them all day long, but when it comes to hunting, she is not finding them. What are the differences between what you're doing in training and what you're doing in shed hunting? A lot of people train differently than they hunt. And so if you train differently than you hunt, when you hunt, you're not going to have the same results as when you train. What you have built into their understanding of what shed hunting is come out of the house, come out of the truck, go for a quick lap, cover about 1.5 acres, and I'll find all these things. If you're a shed dog and you got shed after shed after shed after shed after shed, you don't have the same challenge of staying engaged in the game that you do if you walk for 5 miles and don't find one. Whereas a trainer, I go, okay, put a little shed in my back pocket. Every so often, I let them find one. It's a lot closer to that training thing that you did in your backyard with 5 antlers and 1.5 acres. All right, welcome back, guys. This is podcast episode number 51. It's all downhill from here. It feels good to be past 50. I feel like we're legit now, don't you think so?
You betcha.
It's a pretty serious commitment. So 51 we are on to. We're going to piggyback off of kind of our last one. Our last one was a Facebook generated question that came in. The theme, I went into it thinking it was going to be heavily on shed training. We took a few turns during it. We talked about a few other things. I still think there was a good circle back towards, and really a large portion of it was dedicated to some shed training stuff. It's funny because I think about it and I go, you can start me in on any topic when it comes to field training for a dog, whether it be birds, tracking, sheds. Doesn't matter if it's upland or gun dog work. We could be talking therapy dogs. Whatever it is, specialized training that we're discussing, you can pin me down and we'll start talking about it. And it's almost inevitable that at some point, or maybe a lot of points, we're going to be circled back to the foundation. And I just don't think I'll ever get away from that because I just feel that strongly about it. You can't do things without it. So that's kind of where we ended up shifting. We did go back and touch on some of the connections and the importance of that. Gonna continue with that in this episode. It's another Facebook generated question. The last one was from a guy named Jesse. This one's from a guy named Seth. I haven't even answered it yet. Got the question yesterday. I have not gotten to it. I got a couple of them that I need to get through between Facebook and Instagram. But this is one that I will send this guy a question and answer back, but I'll also inform him that we turned this into a podcast, and we're going to ask him for his address because we're going to send him a t-shirt because I appreciate his contributions, if you will, to what we're doing here from a podcast standpoint. So we started that a week ago or so. We had a couple questions come in. One was a puppy one, and one was our cheeky friend. Mm-hmm. And so that's where the t-shirts came into play. And so we're going to keep doing that. Now, they're not always going to be, every podcast isn't always going to be a question, but I do like them because I think for a couple of reasons. It helps answer one specific person, but I also think when one person has a question, they're not the only ones. Time and time again, you hear very, very similar questions because I just think that we all run into the same problems. I do too. And so the dogs are the same. The handlers and the training philosophies and the approaches vary, but the dogs are the same. So the same issues usually come up. And so that's why I like doing it this way, because I do think it's probably going to help more than just one person. So let me read the question. Hi, Jeremy. I had a question about shed training. Wanted to see if you could help. I have a lab, 3 years old, comes from a shed hunting breeder, but I'm having problems getting her to find sheds in the field. During training, she will find them all day long, but when it comes to hunting, she is not finding them. It's like if it doesn't have my scent, she's unable to find it. Also, she is also a bird dog and will find a wounded bird by tracking it. But with sheds, it's like she's looking for my scent. Any suggestions? I do have your scent products that I used with the rubber shed while she was younger. Should maybe I start using that on my training shed? Well, so let's break this one down. We'll start out in the beginning where he says he gets a dog from a shed hunting breeder. I think that's something that's interesting that you've seen that. I've seen that more and more over the last probably 5 years, where there are kennels that are breeding for shed dogs, and I think it's fine. I think if someone's looking, I always tell people, buy the dog that fits your style and fits the training that you want to do and the hunting that you want to do and the lifestyle that you want to do. So I do think that's important. I think it's really important. I had another person sent me a message on Instagram earlier this week, and I don't know that I answered it either now that I think about it, but I got to get to that one. But he had said something, one of his comments was, I bought a lab from a tracking kennel, a kennel that specializes in tracking Labradors. And I went, and so game recovery, he's talking about big game. And so my thought when I heard that one was, okay, when I hear this one, I hear a shed hunting breeder. I go, okay, here's the thing. I think any dog that I'm going to shed hunt with, any dog that I'm going to track with, any dog that I'm going to do birds with, any dog that I'm going to do, to me, there are skills there are traits that the dogs have that are desirable and are things that I look for, and that is what I look for. I want to put it out there, and I'm not saying that this is right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm just saying, as a customer, be careful that the idea of buying a specific dog to track with because he comes from a tracking kennel, or a specific dog to shed hunt with because he comes from shed dog kennels or bird dog kennels or whatever kennels, I think really what you want is you need a dog that has these inherent traits that are going to lend itself well to your training of whatever it is you're doing. So the same dog, people ask me, what do I look for in shed dogs? The answer is the same thing I look for in a pheasant dog, the same thing I look for in a gun dog, upland waterfall, the same thing I look for in a tracking dog, game recovery. I'm looking for, so I'm just throwing it out there. Be cautious of some of the marketing stuff that gets out there. I would be, just because it comes from a specific type of kennel, make sure it fits all the parts and pieces you need. So I'm just, now I don't think that matters in this question that much. And I think he was just setting this up to say he's got a 3-year-old dog that came from a shed hunting breeder. He's having some issues with it. So the issues that he's having with is, he says, during training she'll find them all day long, but when hunting, she's not finding them. And I think one of the things that we have to do is we have to look at what are the differences. So whenever we have an issue with training, or in our dogs, I should say, whenever we have an issue with our dogs, working our dogs, I always say, let's reverse engineer the issues and find out what are the problems. Really start to call those out. And then once we diagnose what is the problem, how come? And so once we figure that, well, why did that happen? And how did we get to that point? And a lot of it traces itself back to the problem. And whenever you find the problem, I call that the hole, you got to fill it in. So if you start backing up, I think a lot of people run into the issue. I hear this a lot where they find them every time in training, but they don't find them when I'm shed hunting. And I go, what are the differences between what you're doing in training and what you're doing in shed hunting? So I don't know, because I don't have this guy to talk to, but there are a lot of scenarios that we can kind of bounce around, or a few scenarios that we can bounce around. One thing that I see happen a lot is, and a lot of this comes from and is connected to the idea of a shed hunting breeder. I see a lot of shed hunting breeders these days that are basing and building their programs on merit based on awards, and awards are competition type stuff. It's very similar to field trials with hunting dogs. There's a lot of hunting dogs out there, gun dogs and upland dogs, that base kennels that build breeding programs based on titles. It's a measurable way to judge a dog's performance. But I think what is overlooked in that world is the idea of, what are they measured on, and does it match what you plan to do with the dog? And so hunting dogs are hunting dogs, and trial dogs are trial dogs, and there are differences because the game is different. Hunting is different than a trial. So the dog that does very well in a trial maybe doesn't hunt that well. I've seen that a lot. Now, I'm not saying they're all like that, but I've seen it more often than not. And I've talked with guys that are really heavy into field trials, and I hate to say it because it's discouraging and it's disappointing, and it's a little bit. I get worried about the idea of it because I think, is it matching up the right dog to the right people? I see a lot of field trial. I've talked to a lot of field trial guys that don't hunt their field trial dogs, and the reason is because they don't hunt very well. They field trial very well. They win a lot of ribbons and titles and all that stuff, but they don't hunt that well. They're too much to handle in the field for the average hunt for what you're doing. They're just not programmed and wired to do it that way. I had a question from a guy recently that he's got big struggles with heel work, and his problem is the heel work. He does not hunt competitions. He does. We got to turn that off. He doesn't not hunt competitions. He does. Well, it's a field trial, and he runs in these field trials where he has to take the dog from a holding area to the spot where he's going to do his competition, where his little blind spot or his holding area to where he's going to run his retrieves from. And so he can't get the dog to heel from one spot to the next off lead. And he said, it's okay for me to do it in the level I'm at right now because I can put the dog on a lead. But where I want to go to this next level, I can't have the dog on a lead for that. And I can't do it. And so where do I start? Well, this rabbit hole's back to foundation. And I said, I won't even be going there for the weekend if I can't get the dog to heel. I mean, that stuff's got to be first and foremost. So, but the dog does well with the retrieving part. Well, imagine that. It's real natural, and that's the fun stuff, and it's easy to train for that stuff. So when it goes to the idea of training for hunting or training for competition, I do think there's a dramatic difference. And I think some of that runs into issues with our training when we want to take our dogs hunting. I see a lot of times where dogs come out very excited and they'll hunt. And so going back to this guy's question specifically, is during training she'll find them all day long, but when hunting she's not finding them. Now he says if it doesn't have my scent, she's unable to find it. I guarantee you that's insulting to that dog. If you think that she can't find something because it doesn't have your scent on it, you've missed the boat in understanding what the dog does and how it processes scent. The dog can find anything and everything to a degree that we can't even think about wrapping our mind around. That's not the reason. The reason the dog isn't picking up the dummy is not because your scent's not there. It's because other variables. And so when you train, a lot of people get into this idea of hide 5 antlers in the acre and a half or 2 acres of woods back behind the house. We'll hide 5 antlers in there, and I'll leave them. And so some people don't even leave them. They say, and then we go out and we find them, and she finds them, and we all feel good about that. We feel real good. She ran through that woods and she picked them up very quickly, and she knows what she's doing. And so then we challenge her. So then we're going to put them out there and we're going to leave them for a day or two. Let the scent go away, or leave them for a week, whatever you do. Then you go out there and you run them through this woods, and boom, 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 boom. They find them. Yeah, my dog knows how to do this. Well, here's the thing. Then you go shed hunting, and you go out to your farm for the weekend, and you shed hunt. And for me, we'll have a very few spots like that. We do have some spots like that. That in the last podcast I talked a little bit about shed training or shed hunting and how we go about it. And we have food sources, and we leave the deer alone. And we might find 40-acre woods. We might find 10 sheds, and that's really good for us. So I don't know what you're used to and what you're not used to, but 10 sheds in a 40-acre woods for me in a couple hours of shed hunting is really solid. That's really good. But back up and think about that. 40 acres of woods, 10 sheds, that's 1 shed per 4 acres. And now back up to that and make a comparison to what your training scenarios are like. I see so many people put 5 sheds in an acre and a half or 2 acres or 5 acres, just 5 acres. Think about 5 acres, because a lot of people think they have a yard that's 5 acres. Your yard is probably 1/8 of an acre. for most people. If you live in town, you don't have a half-acre lot. You certainly don't, most people certainly don't have an acre lot. An acre lot in town is pretty big. I now go 5 times that. So I think some people struggle with the idea of acreage. It's like deer, kind of. Everyone thinks the benchmark is a 150-inch deer or 125-inch deer or whatever it is. I hear so many people talk about how we're not going to shoot anything under 130 inches. Most of them have never seen a 130-inch deer in their life. Like 130 inches, 125 is Pope and Young for a reason, because very few get to it. And so I think a lot of people shoot 110s thinking they're 130s. And I think a lot of people shoot 130s thinking they shot a 150. And 150s are 180s. And that's a different story. I mean, that's just a different analogy, but an acre food plot, I hear a lot of people talk about how I put about an acre food plot in. That's a giant. You can't shoot across an acre food plot with a bow. It's 80 yards by 80 yards. Like, wow, that's a lot bigger than I thought. Maybe I don't have an acre here. Maybe I have a half or a quarter. So it's all relative to what you understand and have a feeling for conceptually when it comes to sizing things up. But so going back to this shed hunting, a lot of people train in an area that's less than 5 acres. Let's just be real honest. And to spread out five dummies through 5 acres, if you've got 5 acres, which most don't. So now you're talking an acre per antler. And the time that it takes to find them for a trained dog is nothing. I mean, we're talking 10 minutes or less. You're going to walk through that acre and a half and find them all. And then you celebrate and you're excited and you go, yeah, I got this shed dog. But when you go shed hunting, you're not going to have very many places, if ever, or any, where you go into a acre and a half to 3 acre woods and you find 5, 6, 7 sheds. So what actually happens is we put miles on in between antlers. And the dog needs to keep its sense, the heightened sense of what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and when the opportunity comes, they have the opportunity to connect the dots and actually do it. That's the struggle that a lot of people have. A lot of people train differently than they hunt. And so if you train differently than you hunt, when you hunt, you're not going to have the same results as when you train. And when you continue to train that way, you'll keep getting better at it. That's why a lot of folks, I do think, can train a dog very easily to run a course. Like shed training competitions are courses. They set them up and they go through this course. And I've seen, I don't do it. I don't do it because I just don't have interest in competing that way. I don't find a lot of value in it personally. I'd rather find antlers than bring home ribbons. But that's why I don't field trial, because I'd rather hunt than field trial. I'm not knocking field trialing. I think it's what some people want to do with their dogs, and I think it's great. But it's just not what I'm after. I'd rather go shed hunting in the spring. So what I want to do is replicate how I'm going to hunt, how I train to how I'm going to hunt. And so we need to keep that in mind. And so I do see, I've followed along a little bit, and I've seen some stuff. We sponsor some stuff for some shed trial type stuff, because I love the idea of growing the sport. I think it brings a lot of people into it and gives them interest that wouldn't do it otherwise, because they're not going to shed hunt, and they don't shed hunt, and they maybe don't have opportunities to shed hunt. But this is a great opportunity for them to do something with their dog. So we've sponsored some of this stuff, and so I've followed along enough to realize, like, I've seen people that win these things that finish courses in, like, we're talking minutes, like 3 minutes or less, or a minute. I've seen times that I went, hell, I can't even get out of the truck that quickly, much less go find all the antlers. So, but the dog gets wired and understands that, no different than the dog understands if you throw the dummy 50 yards, because that's as far as you can throw. We see this all the time. Dogs hit invisible walls at certain distances. Let's say 35 yards, because 35 yards is reasonable to think you could throw something 35 yards. 35 yards, when you send a dog out and you line the dog out for a retrieve, they get to 35 yards and they start to hunt. And it's because it's a terrible habit that people struggle with, because they can't get their dogs to extend on lines. And it's because they understand that so far out is where you're going to find it. It happens every time. And the reason is, is because in training, every time you throw it as far as you can. And the dog learns, count the steps. 15 steps equals 35 yards, hunt. It's going to be here. And so they also understand, we're going to go hunt right now. We're going to go shed hunting. What you have built into their understanding of what shed hunting is come out of the house, come out of the truck, go for a quick lap, cover about 1.5 acres, and I'll find all these things. If you think it's only because it's your scent, now is your scent there? Absolutely. But they smell, you can't escape them. They're going to smell everything. So we're not fooling a dog's nose. We're conditioning in an understanding of how things are going to get found and how to be efficient with that. Go get them. That's the big reward. Go get these things. So run so far. Are they using that scent as clues? I'm sure they are. But the thing about it is when you take the clues away, they still need to have a habit strong enough to understand a shape and a scent equals a retrieve. And that's what you're missing right now. So we need to start training more like we hunt. And so the other thing is when that happens, so what does that require? More work from your part. You can't go for a 5-minute walk and find 5 antlers every day in and day out, twice a day, maybe 3 times a day, and go, oh, I'm just getting 3 times the positive training that I needed. You need to go for walks like you would when you're shed hunting. And then when you do shed hunt, you need to shed hunt similar to how you train. So when I go shed hunting, I might walk a long ways in between antlers. But when we do find those antlers, it doesn't have to be like the highlight reel from the shed rally last weekend that I was at with these 55 other dogs that ran the course in under 10 minutes. Like, I don't need a dog to run by, slam on the brakes, pick up the antler, bring it back to me, because that's what he did in that scenario. But in this, he's been running now for miles and not picked anything up. And I've been asking him to use his nose, and I've been asking him to find something, but there's an antler and I see it, because a lot of times we see them first. I'm not a bad shed hunter. I'll see a lot of the antlers first. So I see one and I go, there's one there. This is where I connect dots. This is where I take the dog, I manipulate the dog's position to get him downwind, and then I let them run over it a couple times if they have to, because my dogs do it too. Because I'm a basketball fan. I love basketball. I love high school basketball. My son plays high school basketball. And one of the conversations that I've had with my son is, when you are not in the game, you have to be in the game. And he kind of looks at me and goes, yeah, good one, Dad. And I said, no, I'm serious. When you're on the bench, if you are not in the game mentally, and your number gets called, hey, I need you to go in, and you go in, and the game of basketball is too fast to warm up slowly at a high school level. At varsity level, it's different than JV, it's different than freshman, it's different than 6th, 7th, 8th grade. As they get older, the game picks up. And when you get to the varsity level of high school basketball, and then take a jump from there to go to college and then to the pros, we all know what happens there. The game intensifies greatly. And if you get to the point where you don't have the opportunity. Varsity basketball is one of those. You don't have the opportunity to come off the bench cold. Now, physically, you don't have the choice. If you're sitting on the bench for a while and you come in cold, physically you have to warm up. And that's a science thing. But mentally, if you have to warm up as well, by the time you warm up, you're probably coming out because you made a mistake. Because if you're not mentally in the game and you're not physically ready for the game, you're not going to be able to perform. And you don't have that much opportunity in a basketball game because there's only so many minutes and so many possessions. And in high school basketball, as crazy as it sounds, each possession counts. So so we have this conversation about go into the game mentally prepared. At least that's 50%. The physical part, you got to get up and down the court a few times. And these are kids, so they adjust pretty well. But an old guy like me, it might take a little bit. I may even have to stretch, for crying out loud. So that's a hurdle. That's an obstacle. That's a challenge that a player coming off the bench has. If you're a shed dog and you got shed after shed after shed after shed after shed, you don't have the same challenge of staying engaged in the game that you do if you walk for 5 miles and don't find one. That's really defeating. That's mentally easily distracted by everything from deer poop to mice to everything else. So that's where, as a trainer, I go, okay, put a little shed in my back pocket. And every so often, those first couple of years, I do that with every young dog. Every so often, I let them find one. And do they find it good? Yeah, they find it. And is it because my scent's on it? Partly. Is it because they just found one not too long ago and I didn't let them get cold? I didn't let them check out of the game? Yeah, that's part of it too. They stay, it's a lot closer to that training thing that you did in your backyard with 5 antlers and an acre and a half. But it's stretching it out a little bit more and a little bit more. And then as they get older and they start to understand the opportunities click and they get a chance to make it all come together, it starts to make more sense to them. And then you get these older dogs that understand, I gotta be like Michael Jordan. Watch Michael Jordan play basketball. He's the most energy efficient guy I've ever seen play basketball. You'll have to Google it, but watch some of these old videos. Watch him move on and off the court. He's super efficient, and he saves those moments to explode. And when he explodes with this intensity that nobody can keep up with, that's how he won. But when he would run up and down the court, he glides, and he's become so in tune with when and where to spend the energy. That's what made him so great. These older dogs understand there are times when I don't need to be on my 100% attention. There are also times when I catch a slight bit of scent where I better start to intensify my game. And then there are moments where I have to be on point. Not literally, but some dogs maybe. But you got to be sharp. It takes a while for dogs to develop that. Young dogs run around like idiots. And this is an analogy, young bucks in the rut run around like morons. They waste a ton of energy chasing does that they'll never be able to breed. Older bucks don't do that. It's because older bucks were young bucks and realized, don't waste the time and energy when I don't have the opportunity. The idea of matching your training to your hunting. And so when that happens, I think you have to realize that there are limited opportunities to find real sheds. I want everyone right now to do a little gut check. How many sheds did you find last year? Because a lot of the people that are listening to this didn't find any. I bet you the great majority found 5 or less. There's probably a number of you that found 5 to 10. Maybe some found 25 or more. If you hit 100, my goal used to be 100 every year. I've changed my goals. I used to do it. I used to get 100 a year. But I'd go to Iowa once or twice a year. I'd shed hunt Buffalo County with my buddies that is an outfitter out there, Bluff Bucks Outfitters. We'd find 40 a day when I was shed hunting with those guys. We had a lot of land. We had a lot of high deer numbers. We had a lot of things in our favor when it came to shed hunting. So I used to have tons more opportunities to find antlers than I do this time of year or this time in my work schedule, because in the springtime I'm at a lot of shows. Those would be prime times that I normally would have been out shed hunting. So anyway, but I challenge you to think about how many sheds did you find last year, because whatever that answer is, that's the number of opportunities you gave your dog to actually find the real thing. And so when you think about it that way and you go, man, I didn't give them very many opportunities, you have to understand when you do have those opportunities, you have to make the most of them. It can be, and if you watch back, because we did a Facebook Live with Ellie a few years ago when she picked up her first antler. And that got real awkward real quick because she just kept running over it. And this was my personal dog. She was 2 years old. I had trained her. She just kept running over it. And so it literally was live for about 10 minutes of awkwardness of me going, find it, find it, find it, find it. And when I say that, all my dogs just perked up with their ears and they're looking at me because that tone told them there's something here to find. And she kept looking and she kept looking. And she looked an awful lot like Bella did yesterday when she ran up to a dummy and ran over it. She knew it was there. She saw it. But she had never picked one of those things up before. And she went, I don't know if this is what I'm supposed to be finding. I'm going to look for something else. And so Ellie did the same thing. And that antler fell off of a deer's head and laid there for I don't know, a month or so. And so the little bit of difference between what that was and what we had trained for up to that point was enough for her to go, I don't think this is what I'm supposed to find. I'm going to keep looking. And she kept looking, and she kept looking, and she kept looking, and she kept looking, and she kept looking. And I stood back and I went, oh boy, here we are live on Facebook, and I'm showing how good my dog is. And then eventually, she almost bumped into it and with her nose, and I timed that out with, good girl, you're so good. And she looked at me, she picked it up and brought it back to me. And I praised her and praised her and praised her. And the next one, she did the same thing, but it was for about a quarter of the time. She hunted, picked it up, brought it back, good girl. And within a few opportunities of that, she started to connect the dots and I believe understand what the hell we're really doing here. But if you only have 1, 2, 3 times a year to do that, it might take you a few years to really get to where you want to be. And here's the problem, is most people won't be patient enough to allow their dog to run over an antler for 10 minutes straight and not blow up. Because I've seen it way too often. I've seen it where the guys are out there with their buddies and they're showing off their new shed dog that they trained that runs the course behind their house in 3 minutes flat. And then they take them out really shed hunting and they struggle and they find it, their buddy finds a shed and they bring the dog over because the buddies, don't touch it, I'm gonna let my dog get it. So the buddy finds it, you go over, you bring your dog and your dog starts to run past it and you wanna crawl under the rock. And what do? Instead of crawling under the rock, you get pissed. And then your tone starts, find it, God damn it, find it. And you get hard on that dog. And that dog goes, oh my God, I'm sorry. I don't know what you want. And when they don't know what you want and they shut down and when they get into that mental state, they're not learning anything. They won't learn anything. Next time you bring your dog out, yell at it heavily right before you start your training and see how good the session goes. Because you're going to put their mindset into this idea of shutdown and they're not going to learn anything no matter what you do. And what do most people do to try to put that fire out? They grab the can of gas and they dump it on it. What's going to happen? As soon as you get mad, it's easy to get madder. It's a really slippery slope. And so next thing you know, you're yelling at your dog and hollering at your dog, and then you're frustrated, and then you're stomping around the woods, and then you go over and you pick that antler up and you put it in your pouch and you're on to the next. Screw it. And if that's the one shed you found that year, or one of the 3, let's say you found 3, and that's one of them. You just gave up 33% of your chance for the dog to gain something. So I got a feeling that there's a lot of people listening to this right now, maybe smiling, maybe not smiling. Maybe they're just going, ooh. But I bet you there's a lot of people that are listening to this that can relate to the idea of when things don't go well, how do you respond? So this is how you do it. 1001, 1002, 1003. And by the time you slowly count to 3, that's enough time for your brain to let my wife, what's the movie, Inside Out, I think? It's a cartoon. There's this movie, and the little red guy, my wife used to, and our daughter, Sierra, she used to say, Jared, you're being the red guy. Because my little red guy is the angry guy, and he would get mad, and he would take over the controls. And I literally used to have the red guy involved too much. And so if you don't know the movie, you're not going to get it. If you do know the movie, I hope you're chuckling. But don't let red guy be out there with you shed hunting. Instead, when red guy comes to take the steering wheel, 1001, 1002, 1003, think of this podcast. Think of Jeremy in his girly voice when you're such a good dog. Think of whatever it is that makes you smile and laugh and go, it's not that bad. I'm just going to be patient. We're going to let Fido here figure it out. And let him work it out. And it doesn't matter how long it takes. Make sure they succeed and then build on it. And then also take a look at the big picture and go into it with realistic expectations and say, if you find 15 sheds this year, you're probably 90%, that's 90% more than most will find, I would venture to say. There's not a lot of people that find that many in comparison to those that look. So if you don't find that many, even if you find 100, 100's a lot. Like, I know a few guys that do. I used to, not anymore, but if you find 100, you're doing pretty good. Like, you're doing real good. If you find 100 in one full year, that's 100 opportunities. 100, I can go to a pheasant farm with a dog and put them on 100 opportunities to flush a bird a day. That's why we're able to develop some of these gun dogs and bird dogs a little bit quicker in the hunt scene, because we can replicate the hunt pretty close. Game birds are different. Game farm birds are different than wild. There's no doubt about it. But they're pretty close. In a lot of scenarios, they're very close. And you can give the dog an opportunity, a lot of opportunities, in a really short period of time. And that's why they get good. If you do something a lot, you get better at it. If you do it once in a while, or very few times, it's hard to get good at it. There's a lot of things I can't do well. And it's not because I can't do them well, it's because I don't practice at it often and consistently. And so the same as these dogs aren't robotic. They're not computers that you program and they just hold the information and data. They're living things. They're influenced by lots of different elements that we can control a lot of. And so we have to keep that in mind. They might struggle some days. Trust me, some Saturday mornings I struggle if Friday night gets too late. Your dogs go through that stuff too. Maybe not for the same reasons, but you got to keep that in mind. We all think our dogs are robots and Superman and never have bad days, and that's not true. So that's got a little bit longer than what we probably started out thinking it would be, but we had to make a sale in the middle of here with Hodag. So the question, that one came from, who did that come from? Seth. That came from Seth. So Seth, we're going to send you a message. I'm going to have you send me your address. We're going to send you a link or information on the podcast, but we'll also send you a t-shirt. I appreciate your help. The very end of his said that he has our scent product, or has our products. Should I start using that on my training shed? Yeah, I would. Why not? I think the idea of scent is you add scent for training because it allows you to find success. You can adjust how much scent you use and how little you use and it's usually based on conditions more than anything. But the idea of adding scent elements is a training tactic to set dogs up for success. And then we take all of that training and we apply it closer and closer to the real thing. And then when we do the real thing, we have realistic expectations and we work through those hurdles no different than we would the hurdles that happened earlier in our training process. So, great question, Seth. I'm glad you asked it. Guys, that's going to do it for number 51. Appreciate all of your support. If you do us the favor, go to our whatever apps or wherever you're listening to this from, and be sure to subscribe. Do me a favor. 'Tis the season to be giving. Christmas time here. Share this with somebody that you think it might help. There's a lot of little Christmas puppies that are going to be out there, and my hope is that those Christmas puppies are with them next Christmas as well. A lot of times Christmas puppies struggle because it's an impulse thing and feels good at the moment, but if you don't start working with those Christmas puppies, by Easter they're pound puppies, and we don't want to see that. So we want, if you know someone that you think might get some value out of this, go ahead and share it with them. The podcast, the website, the social platforms, the puppy DVD. Maybe that's a stocking stuffer for you. I've been pretty crazy with my National Lampoon's artwork that I've been doing, hours and hours dedicated to it on Photoshop. But I'll be sharing some of those on our pages as well as we get closer to the season. But they make a nice little stocking stuffer. So shameless plug there, but we're going to use it. You guys have a great time with your training. Enjoy your training. I think that's another thing that I don't talk about enough is if you have fun with it, you're going to do it more often. If you do it more often, you're going to have more success. So it's a snowball. Good luck with it. Keep us posted. Thank you for the support, and we will continue to do them.